Andrew Parsons, the president of the International Paralympic Committee, is in Brasilia. Andrew, the Games returned to Europe for the first time since London 2012, where they were so successful. How confident are you that these Paralympic Games will be the most accessible and most affordable ever?
Well, thank you very much, Scott. First of all, it's always good to be back to Europe, but more important than that is to have spectators back to the stadiums, to the venues after Beijing in the Winter Paralympics and Tokyo in the Summer Paralympics. I think the idea is that we have, of course, the good legacy coming from these games, and accessibility and affordability is something that it needs to be a central part of that. When it comes to accessibility for on a legacy mode in terms of making the life of Parisians and French people more accessible, persons with disability there, more accessible after the Games, I think we are in a very good place with a lot of investment coming from the national government and more than 1.5 billion euros invested in making the country more accessible, and 125 million euros being invested by the city of Paris in making their transport system more accessible, and also some other initiatives like making sport clubs, 3,000 sport clubs, more welcoming to persons with disability but this is a nationwide effort in all of the fronts. So not for athletes, but for persons with disability in general who wants to practice sport.
Let's talk about the makeup of the athletes who will compete in Paris. And the words that are always so important when it comes to the Paralympic movement are inclusion and diversity. Is Paris 2024 trending in the right direction?
I think so, because one fundamental principle for us, Scott, is universality. And there's a lot of discussion that universality versus the top athletes of each sport. And we believe there's space for everyone. So we will have more countries than ever before, athletes from more countries than ever before attending the Games. And this is very important because when these athletes, they go back to the nation, the impact that they have in Paralympic sport is incredible. Even if it's one athlete qualifying for the Games, even if it's one athlete winning a medal or making a final, this is fundamental. So universality is a principle that the IPC will never let go. It will remain a focus. And in terms of, let's say, diversity means also that we would like more participation from not only different parts of the world, but let's say more athletes from specific regions that are still underrepresented at the Games. Also, when it comes to gender, we are not in the 50% yet. In Paris, the target is to get to 50% in Brisbane 2032, but we have been steadily improving in that area since Beijing 2008. So we need to walk the talk, right? So if we are a movement about inclusion and diversity, we need to lead by example.
The war against Ukraine continues, and yet some athletes from Russia and Belarusian athletes will compete in Paris 2024. Andrew, how does that work? And why does it need to work?
I think it's a very good question, Scott, and that's such a fundamental question that we asked our membership to ask that question for the International Paralympic Movement. So it was not a decision taken by the president or by the executive committee. It was a decision taken by a whole of our membership in a General Assembly, and the decision was to suspend both the Paralympic committees of Russia and Belarus, but still give the opportunity for their athletes to compete. And as a decision of our membership of our General Assembly, we needed to work on it. And as the governing board, we then came up with what we call strict eligibility criteria for these neutral athletes, that we are calling them, neutral Paralympic athletes, to compete at the Games. At the same time that we are respecting the majority of our membership, we do understand that this decision it's something that many people, they don't like, they don't respect, they think differently, and we are open to that. We understand that people have different views on the conflict or the role the sport has to play in situations like this. But again, we are a democratic organization, and that we have to follow the decision of the majority of the members, and they decided this way.
The National Paralympic Committee of Canada, Andrew, has decided to financially reward medal winners on an equal basis with their Olympic counterparts. How significant is this trend? It's happening in the United States and in other countries as well.
I think it shows equality, right? At the end of the day, if a Canadian athlete or a Canadian para-athlete, they win medals, is the same Canadian flag, is the same Canadian national anthem. So why do not reward them in the same way? I think it's a sign of equality, and we really welcome initiatives like that coming from the Paralympic committees and Olympic committees, all coming from governments. Different countries, they have different ways of rewarding financially their athletes, but we believe it's a step into the right direction. So we congratulate the Canadian Paralympic Committee and our good friends there.
You know, the Paralympic movement is constantly fighting against stereotype, that somehow Paralympians are inspirational by virtue of the fact that they participate in the games. You think that they're more than that, and the way that you are trying to portray these athletes is about more than that. Can you explain that, Andrew?
Yeah, I think the more we treat Paralympic athletes as athletes, full stop, I think you need to recognize athletes for what they achieve in the field of play, for how inspirational their performances are. You know, I think any athlete starts competing and training inspired by another athlete. So I think that is the kind of inspiration that we want in the movement, is athletes inspiring new athletes, but not, oh, he has a disability and run. I don't think this is the right kind of inspiration that we want. We want to show to the world that person with disability can be like any other. So the kind of feelings that sometimes they inspire and people should come from, let's say, from the same angle. So there is a term for that. It's called inspiration porn, which is a very aggressive term, I know. But it's when you treat persons with disability like they are less because they have a disability, and then even a small achievement, let's say you give another dimension to it. And this is not good for the person with disability in question.
Let's face it, with about 3 months to go, the world continues to be a fractious place. There is so much conflict going on, so many struggles. I'm wondering if you're optimistic that a return to normalcy at the Olympic and Paralympic Games, that we can somehow celebrate sport and that it will have a positive effect. Paris 2024 will have a positive effect, Andrew.
Scott, I have to be optimistic. As a leader of a movement that believes the sport can change the world, I don't think the sport can change the world only for persons with disabilities. So I think, or change the mindset of people around the world only about persons with disability. I do believe the sport events like the Olympics and the Paralympics, they can change attitudes. They can be examples, or as some people like to say, beacons of hope. But I do think that whenever you, for example, you experience a Paralympic village or an Olympic village, and you see all those athletes for different nationalities eating together, living together under the same roof, and not fighting and not disputing, but still competing at the highest possible level, it's a good metaphor to the rest of the world. So yes, I'm optimistic that we can give some good steps into the right direction with the Olympics and Paralympics. We cannot be over idealistic. We cannot be, disconnected from reality. We know the world we live in, but we believe that sport can be a very powerful tool for inclusion and for the promotion of diversity, but also for peace. And I do believe that probably these are the three elements that we need more in the world today, to be a more peaceful world, a more inclusive world, and a more diverse world.
Andrew, thanks so much for doing this, and I hope to see you in Paris.
My pleasure, Scott. See you in Paris.